Welcome back. Today we are watching ABC News reacts to the 2024 election results. This is a compilation of everything that happened from the start of the broadcast to the end of the broadcast. So we're going to see the momentum and the election results and these guys' view on what's happening in real time. Shout out to Base Life Guru for this video. Great clip. And with that being said, let's get into it.
Be a razor-thin election, but I do believe that the Democrats have put all of the ingredients, and what we're looking for now is a delicious bowl of gumbo. The roux is there. We just need the salt and the seasoning.
Reince Priebus, I think you predicted 300 plus electoral votes for Donald Trump on Sunday, standing by that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I look at two things.
No,
George.
in fact,
One,
I spoke to a person in the Trump campaign last night who said that their words exactly, we wanted to vomit the last 9 days because he completely got off message. And they're afraid he may have lost it in the last 9 days.
I've been telling you about
today,
over about 2 weeks. They're concerned about the threat environment here. There have been a lot of threats. And one of the major things that they think that the electorate forgets is the human factor. There are human beings who are running these machines, who are running these polling stations. And they want people to remember that there will be times that somebody forgets to plug in the machine or doesn't turn on the lights outside in the parking lot. And that doesn't mean that there is conspiracy, and it doesn't mean that there is fraud. But already the Trump campaign jumping back on that, telling or making allegations on Twitter that there has been fraud here in Philadelphia, specifically something that the DA has said is just not happening. Also, Governor Josh Shapiro has been telling me for days that the allegations of fraud, a blatant lie.
Democrats think North Carolina was clearly the best chance to pick up a state that Donald Trump had won.
So let's take it. We're so glad you're with us here on ABC News. You're looking live at the tracker of the battleground states tonight. As you can see, the key state of Georgia won by President Biden 4 years ago by just about 11,000 votes. Donald Trump leading Kamala Harris by about 10 points there. Again, many of this is rural counties of that Atlanta metro area. We're waiting for a significant amount of the vote to come in. North Carolina at this hour, Kamala Harris with the lead. Again, it's still early, and this is a reflection in large part of the early vote. And Rick Klein standing by in a moment. He'll break that down, why that is. And of course, Pennsylvania, the polls closing there just 21 minutes ago. Mary Bruce reporting there are long lines. The campaign
in Pennsylvania, in those battleground states, all over the place. It is Donald Trump's language that is turning them off. And Kamala Harris is taking full advantage of that. She's reminding voters the kinds of things Donald Trump has said, like, I want to protect women, whether they like it or not. He calls her names. He calls her retarded. He calls her names that are very offensive to female voters. But they are also a voting bloc that gets out there. And when you look at those long lines that we've been talking about tonight, and the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign trying to get those people to stay in line, women are very, very motivated and very angry. Women I've talked to in these states about what Donald Trump has said, they may stay in those lines. Those low propensity male voters that Donald Trump has gone after, those younger voters who don't usually vote, will they stay in those lines? But we have just seen that massive gender gap.
Yeah, really interesting.
Push for those hidden Harris voters that we had been talking about, for those dissatisfied Republican voters. I think back to an event in Bucks County just a couple weeks ago where Harris was standing there on stage with over 100 Republican officials and aides to former Republican presidents, making the argument, echoing the argument that Liz Cheney has made to Republican women, that you can come out, put country above party, and you don't have to tell anyone
going to get you the most votes,
your
then I would say
and also,
you've got to go for it. I think one of the interesting things that we haven't talked about tonight was, if you look at Osceola County in Florida, if you look at that county, you'll see that Donald Trump right now is winning that county. That is a very heavy Puerto Rican county. And if you go look at 2020, he lost that county by 12, 13 points. It's a pretty amazing thing. The other thing that's going on right now is Virginia is about tied with about 40 to 45% of the vote in, which is one of the things that political folks out there look at, because it's a pretty quick state. They close at 7 p.m. And for a lot of us, we look at Virginia to kind of get a sense on where things are at.
It's getting a lot of attention so far as Loudoun County. These are suburbs and kind of extended areas outside Washington, D.C. This is the part of the state that has made Virginia essentially a blue state at the national level. And it's a place that you can see Hillary Clinton getting about 56%. Joe Biden goes up to 61%. So far tonight, it's about 95% of the vote in. Harris is looking more like Hillary Clinton in Virginia. Now, she won the state as well, but that's not the kind of trend line you'd want. And again, these are highly educated suburban voters. These are places places where you'd expect Harris to do extremely well. She's going to be hitting her benchmarks. I don't think it's a real concern in the Harris campaign right now. But as you know, that Donald Trump is going to be running up his numbers in more conservative parts of the state. This is where Reince is right, that it could be a warning sign for other trends we're seeing elsewhere in the country.
Or a tighter race than it was 4 years ago.
Definitely that. I mean, we can look at a state like Florida right now, which is going overwhelmingly Republican. I don't think we're going to see the same kind of trend in Virginia, but we're not seeing Democrats overperform in the same way Republicans are in a red state of Florida.
A lot of Let's go to Wisconsin, which used to be a battleground state, now far more red than it was even just a decade ago. What are we seeing as far as Latino voters, Lindsay, in Florida?
This is kind of foreboding potentially for the Harris campaign. When you take a look at the Hispanic and Latino vote in Florida, 24%, they account for the electorate. Look at this. Donald Trump leading by 16 points over Kamala Harris. He's getting 57% of the vote. He's actually doing 11 points better with Latinos than he did in 2020. And Republicans actually haven't won the Latino vote since 2004. Now, some people might say, well, there are a lot of Cuban voters in particular in Florida, but still, she's actually underperforming. And Cuban voters tend to go with Republicans, so that's not so unusual. But she's also underperforming with the Latino vote when it comes to battleground states of Georgia and also Pennsylvania.
Like most voters, the top issues for Latinos are the economy, inflation, crime, and immigration. And we know that former President Trump does better on those issues. Now, there is anecdotal indications and some polling on Spanish language media that shows that the so-called joke at Madison Square Garden, calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, has moved some Puerto Rican voters her way in Pennsylvania, home to over 400,000 Puerto Rican voters, as well as North Carolina and Georgia with hundreds of thousands. And here in Florida, where Puerto Ricans are the second largest Latino voting bloc. I know previous said that they were leaning towards Trump, but we have to wait till we see those results. There's also indication that the insult on Puerto Rico could have influence on other Latino voters who have expressed outrage at the incident in solidarity with Puerto Ricans. They say an insult to one of ours is an insult to all.
Maria Elena Salinas, where's the benchmark for Fulton County? Where does she need to be performing? Well, she's just below it.
She's about a point below that. And just to put in perspective,
Fulton County is right that under Florida's rules, this amendment failed. But you look at the numbers, 57% of Floridians actually did vote to protect abortion under the state's constitution. So it just has a higher threshold than other states. So of course it's right, this amendment failed.
Republican parts of the state, Donald Trump hitting his numbers just about everywhere. I haven't found many places yet where he isn't hitting where he wants to be in terms of the 538 benchmarks or in terms of the history. The turnout machine, even if it wasn't on the ground the same way it was for the Democrats, seems to have been working, at least in these initial numbers in Michigan and elsewhere.
What are some of those numbers starting to come in as well as voters begin to fill in their ballots? What are some of the key concerns?
Right. When we look at some of this preliminary exit poll data, what we see is that the state of democracy has actually edged out the economy as the number one issue that voters care about as they consider who to vote for, followed by the economy. Abortion, you see there in the middle with 14% of voters saying that. Immigration, which has been an issue that the Trump campaign has really leaned into, falling there at the fourth slot at 11%, and foreign policy at the end.
Let's look at Georgia.
Wow.
What do we see?
All right.
Yeah, so Georgia's trending a little bit worse, at least in our numbers right now for Harris. 210,000. Trump seems to be in a pretty good position right now, but we're still waiting on so much vote. But just to take you
I'm hearing that they're still very.
So just to recap so far, what's happening? Trump has 162 electoral votes. Harris has 62. Everybody on ABC News is concentrating on the female vote, the Latino vote, and basically just showing polls that they have. And a lot of takes are pretty awful.
Very excited about what they're seeing. They're cautiously optimistic about North Carolina. They feel like there's not enough there for the Harris campaign to make up the ground that they need to make up. They're happy about what's happening in Ohio, that they seem to be up by 10 at this point. And historically, Ohio's been in our party sort of a mental issue where if we're not winning by 10 in Ohio, we're worried about everything else. And that number looks good. There is some, they're nervous about Pennsylvania. There's a lot of vote that's out there. They know that there is a ton of early vote that hasn't even been touched. So there's no arrogance about that, but now all the attention is going to start moving to that blue wall. Virginia being tied is another issue that is getting them excited. They weren't expecting Virginia to be tied. There's 60% of the vote in, I think, about now in Virginia. The fact that that's tied and in the suburbs, Trump did not do that badly around Washington, D.C.
Could be a signal for other states. Matt, what are you hearing?
I'm hearing that it looks like Senator Casey has a very good chance here. I mean, from the beginning, Governor Josh Shapiro and others have told me that he is the most likely to win here. His father was a governor. He is the son of a very famous family here, also from Scranton, like
Thanks so much. Let's go to the wall here. You can see the three blue wall states right up there right now. Kamala Harris with a lead early in the night in all three of those states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, all about the same margin, by the way, 52 to 47 Pennsylvania, a similar lead in Michigan, and with 18% of the vote in Wisconsin, 51 47.
Very close, still very tight, and a long way to go. I mean, that is the message coming out of the Harris campaign tonight. I think they are encouraged and buoyed by what they are seeing in Pennsylvania. I think, when it comes to Georgia, I'm hearing that they are pointing particularly to the suburban support that they're getting there. They say they are tracking slightly above expectations among suburban early voters in Georgia. They also are pointing to the rural turnout in Georgia. They say they're not seeing signs of some surging rural turnout. They, of course, are waiting for results from those larger rural counties. But look, they have said all along their most straightforward path is to win the blue wall states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. They have put a lot of energy and effort into those three states. But again, they always said this is going to be a tight race that was going to be won in the margins.
Democrats throughout the Sun Belt, whether it's in the non-battleground states like Virginia or like Florida, or whether it's in the battleground states, Georgia and North Carolina. Look, anybody can still win there, but you don't see any sign that Kamala Harris is running away with anything. What I just heard from a top Democrat who is following this as close as anybody, it was always going to come down to the blue wall. Everything else is gravy.
Which is why you feel like that pit in your stomach, no matter what side you're on tonight, as you look at the map coming together, a very competitive race. And it would look like, Rick, if the Harris campaign has a path to 270, it's looking more and more like it's got to be through that blue wall, the Rust Belt, and Wisconsin.
Let's take a look. Now he's in Philly tonight. Matt, we're seeing roughly 22% of the vote now. Vice President Kamala Harris seems to be holding on to her lead over the former president. As we know, Pennsylvania has the most electoral votes of any swing state, Matt.
19 of them, Kira, and the math doesn't work for either candidate unless they win Pennsylvania. And Kamala Harris jumped out to a very big and early lead. That has dwindled to what we are seeing right now. And this is why there's so much focus tonight
votes
on
the
the count.
66% of the vote in. We'll dive into where that vote remains. In Pennsylvania at this hour, Kamala Harris holding onto a very slim lead in the very important state, Keystone State, 19 electoral votes. Very difficult to win the White House without the state of Pennsylvania. As you can see, about 43% of the vote in at this hour. Kamala Harris with the slightest of leads there.
To the economy. And even those Democrats who were out canvassing for Kamala Harris knew that was an issue. Like, how do you explain to people the economy that people trust Donald Trump more on that? And they said, well, we tell them it just takes time. So that message was not really resonating. Nevada has the highest unemployment rate of any state in the country. They were devastated after COVID. And that is the issue. You can talk about exaggeration. You can talk about them calling Puerto Ricans garbage. You can talk about all those things, but it came back to the economy. They can hear lies. They can hear mistruths. They can hear exaggerations. But their truth is their grocery bills, their gas bills. And that's what it came back to on many, many people I interviewed.
And the high cost of housing, what Lindsay was showing us, I mean, she still is leading among Latino voters, but not by the margin that President Biden did 4 years ago. And that's got to be very concerning for the Democrats and the Harris campaign, Mary.
Yeah, look, I would just remind over and over again that they had said from the very beginning, and they're saying again tonight, their most straightforward path is through those blue wall states. And when you look at what we're seing coming in, that certainly seems to still be the case. And I suspect is still their
Looks like it's going to be a close state.
Interesting. The battle for Pennsylvania, Donna. What do you make?
of it?
First of all, I've taken my meditation early because, once again, Democrats are going to come in late. They're going to come in late in Pennsylvania. And clearly in Georgia, what's happening is that Democrats are not overperforming. And DeKalb and Cobb and Fulton, you have to overperform because Donald Trump is doing 4 points better in some of the rural areas. So, again, Democratic cities tend to come in late. I'm seeing that pattern once again. I have good information that Philadelphia is going to come in much stronger than in 2020. And by the way, in some of these areas, you can compare apples to apples, but Kamala Harris has had to build a different coalition. So I'm also looking in some of these suburbs, if the issue of abortion, the threat of democracy, if it worked in those areas in terms of pulling out her vote.
This is just one of those really strange ones to see a 4,000 vote edge.
You hear how they say if it was received, if it's viewed well. This is the funniest thing. Let's just go back to it real quick.
If the issue of abortion, the threat of democracy, if it worked in those areas in terms of pulling out her vote.
This is just one of those really.
You can compare apples to apples, but Kamala Harris has had to build a different coalition. So I'm also looking in some of these suburbs, if the issue of abortion, the threat of democracy, if it worked in those areas in terms of.
Here they say, if it worked, right? This was always been a, let's just conquer some talking points and just hammer down on them and see if it works. Not if it's true, if it's an actual narrative, but this is something they were pushing hard. And I'm so happy that we saw the, electorate not really go for it. Amazing. Shocker.
This is just one of those really strange ones to see a 4,000 vote edge. A lot of votes left in the Democratic areas. Those are our bluer dots. But again, it's just not. One of the things that strikes me, David, looking at the map as it's filled in so far, the fact that the Democrats are sweating some of the places that should have been safe. We haven't made a projection in New Hampshire. We haven't.
Really tough night it's shaping up to be for Democrats in the Senate.
Eva, thank you, Mary Bruce. You've been in contact with your sources at the campaign. What are they saying about the night? I gather they'll say this is the path that we knew we were working towards, and that means it's a late night.
Bingo. They they knew that this was going to be tight. They knew this was going to take a long time. The message coming from the Harris campaign right now is just.
The optics on 201 to 91 is so bad. This had them cooking internally for a while.
Everybody wait. They're not prepared to say at this point that it's, blue wall or bust. They still feel that they, have a chance in North Carolina and Georgia, that some of those places that are left to report out, may be more of their supporters. But look, they always knew that this was going to be a very close race and was going to take a lot of time. And we certainly are seeing that play out right now.
We can project another winner here in the state of Iowa. Former President Donald Trump picks up 6 electoral votes in the state of Iowa. This is particularly interesting. We thought Iowa would go to Donald Trump, but then a lot of news in the last few days before this election. The final Des Moines Register poll from J.N. Seltzer, obviously respected political.
Seltzer actually dropped the ball. I don't know how much money she made off of doing that poll. She had Democrats up like 10, 11, or 12 or something like that in Iowa, that is so bizarre. There's only one thing that could have really happened, because there's no way she honestly thought Iowa was going to shift that many points. Actually, the opposite happened. Other states shifted that many points. That's wild.
Political scientist, but there are going to be a lot of questions about what she missed in the poll.
I mean, she was tracking a narrow lead for Kamala Harris that sent shockwaves throughout the political world, what it could mean for other states, not just Iowa. So to see Iowa coming in for Donald Trump, and apparently by a very convincing margins, looks like a serious swing and a miss from a usually reliable pollster.
That's right.
I'll head over to the big word.
That's right, which is the most Republican of the county. So she's got to like these numbers. You're losing by 45,000 votes. That's never good, but it's better than the opposite.
But just look at this. This is a 1,000 vote race in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, you do this to us every time. You're doing it to us again tonight. Between these two candidates, a very close
if you look
race.
at the final votes here, Harris isn't even close to where she was last time in Green Bay. A bunch of places where you're just not seeing the Harris numbers and you are seeing the Trump numbers. It's very striking. 5,000 votes in Wisconsin. And again, that is the only path she has left if North Carolina and Georgia don't go her way. We mentioned it on air in an election night, Connecticut on air, a 24,000 vote margin tells you that there's something that she hasn't really been able to bring out her base in places that don't get a lot of attention in presidential.
But it's early.
We got a long way to go.
So let's go back to some of these Senate races.
Yeah, Pennsylvania right now is still a problem for Kamala Harris, an advantage Donald Trump, 100,000 vote margin, a lot left of the vote.
We're closing in on 11 o'clock here in the east, 8 o'clock on the west. 4 more states set to close, including California, with its 54 electoral votes. Your battlegrounds. I want to get right to Mary Bruce, covering the vice president, covering the Harris campaign. And basically, you got your hands on a memo that went out to internal staff saying this is going to buckle up. This is going to be a long election.
This email reads like a reality check from the Harris campaign manager to her staff. We've obtained this by ABC News. And she says what we have all been talking about, that they knew this race was going to be razor thin. She says this is exactly what they prepared for, and that their clearest path to 270 remains to be through the blue wall that we've been talking about all night. She says we feel good about what we are seeing. That said, she is cautioning that this is going to take some time. She runs through those blue wall states, saying in Pennsylvania, they overperformed turnout expectations in Philadelphia. She says they're seeing especially high turnout with large non-white and student populations. And then in Michigan and Wisconsin, she notes, they are still awaiting a significant amount of the vote to come in Michigan, pointing to Detroit, also saying other results in Michigan are harder to parse. In Wisconsin, she points to remaining vote in Dane and Milwaukee counties. And then what she says, David, is what we do know is this race is not going to come into focus until the early morning hours. David, she urges their team to, quote, get some sleep and get ready to close out strong.
John?
But can I say that is absolutely the message that we're hearing tonight from the Kamala Harris campaign. But I am also talking to Democrats, not precisely on the Kamala Harris campaign, but with very much a vested interest in what's happening here, who are feeling that this is looking very bad for her, who are very concerned about the trends they're seeing, both in those Sun Belt states, concerns about what they're seeing in Wisconsin, and seeing a path. Sure, this is not over. It's certainly not over, but seeing it as a very steep and narrow path for Kamala Harris. A lot of deep concerns among Democrats, very vested in this campaign. Although, to be sure, as you've heard from Mary, the campaign, the Harris campaign, still very much sees a path and says this is going to be long and we need to be patient. And I think when they say long, they don't mean a long night. They mean a long week.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's sobering, John Carl. Appreciate
I just opened up when I heard Mary said, I said, oh, I got a memo finally. Look, I've worked on too many Democratic campaigns to throw in the towel. This is when it gets really good. If you're a good Democrat, you got to stay up past midnight to find some joy. There's some outstanding ballots. And of course, Philly, we talked about Milwaukee. I'm still waiting for Detroit to come in because for the first time, Wayne County allowed people to vote on the same day. It's going to be close. We're not going to win all 7 battleground states. The blue wall is clearly more important than ever. I don't want to feel like 2016. By 11:20 at night, we were calling into Milwaukee to say, there's nothing left. Well, if you call into Milwaukee now, there's still a lot of votes left. Philadelphia, a lot of votes. So be patient. Democrats, don't go running for the refrigerator and finding a beer. Just be patient. We're not there yet.
Donna Brazil asking the country to be patient tonight. We do have some news. The decision desk here at ABC News has not projected Georgia, but we can report that Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, has now said at a press conference moments ago that Donald Trump has a, quote, insurmountable lead with the number of votes outstanding in the state of Georgia. He said, it looks like this is pretty much done. I think the results are pretty well baked in. And of course, you all at home remember our reporting on Raffensperger, the Republican who famously stood firm during that key phone call when Donald Trump asked, just find me the 11,000 votes when he lost to Joe Biden. So this is not someone who's necessarily obviously very friendly with Donald Trump. He stands by the process. He stands by the hard work in that state to make sure that this election was safe. And tonight, moments ago, again, we haven't projected this at ABC News, but the Secretary of State in Georgia saying this is insurmountable that Donald Trump has won there.
And look, Brad Raffensperger is a Republican. He's elected Republican, but he is a straight shooter. No doubt about it. So Again, we haven't called it, but I would take what he said very seriously.
Let's get right to the ground.
He's got a 41,000. Trump's got a 41,000 vote lead right now. There's more to come, and there's more blue votes to come in as well. So a long way to go, but rather be Donald Trump here than Kamala Harris
in Wisconsin. Say that again, Donna.
I would rather be Kamala Harris. Look, you know the state better than I know it, but I also know how difficult it is to get all of the votes counted in Milwaukee. And also Dane. I mean, Dane had not only a significant early vote, but also a great turnout today with the same-day registration, as well as some of the young people in line. So I still believe the verdict is still out. We may not know Milwaukee, the final verdict, until sometime tomorrow morning.
Got to stick to the talking points. Cool, right? Overall, your bias is showing. When you're down that much that early on, it's not looking good.
It's too early.
You could be right.
Well, you owe me a beer.
The hopium is something to admire, really. No matter what's going on, the hopium and copium is undoubtedly the biggest in the Democratic Party.
I don't think you're going to be right, but you could be. I'm not saying
I'll take Milwaukee best.
I mean, I'd rather be where we're at.
Spotted cow. But Dane County, they've already counted 94% of the vote. And she seems to have fallen short. That's a
John, these are razor thin margin.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
come on, let's not try to win by a blowout. I mean, she's getting there.
We're starting to see Trump.
Let's look at the
really romp of the score. I mean, this is obviously not a meaningful number at the end of the night.
That map looks pretty dang good, even without the swing state votes. But this is what they were looking at early on. And I mean, Trump was up in the 200s for so long. Harris had kind of slower numbers, and they didn't like that. Trump had way more on the popular vote for a long time.
But as of now, he's winning the popular vote by 5,600,000 votes. That will change with California. There's a lot of votes out there, but that's not a result that a lot of people saw coming, that it would even be close on the popular vote side. I think it's a function of all that rural run-up and how close he has kept it in all these other states.
Extraordinary night unfolding.
Harris
Rick Klein over at the big board.
at Howard University. Eva Pilgrim is there. Eva, let's talk about the atmosphere there.
Well, Kira, I can tell you there has been a real vibe shift here in the last 30 minutes to 45 minutes or so. We were actually starting to see some people that are leaving. There have been streams of people going. Crowd has thinned out just a little bit. We've spoken with campaign sources who they tell us that they think that they can still hold the blue wall. But when we talk to people within the Democratic Party, there's a real concern that's starting to build as they look at the margins in these blue wall states, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Michigan. There's nerves, a lot of nerves tonight about the numbers that they're seeing coming in and just how she's performing versus how Joe Biden did 4 years ago. One of the things that
Look, I mean, I would never, ever be caught at a place like this, even if I know my candidate I thought was going to win. Just in case he isn't, I don't want to deal with any of this stuff at all. You can't catch me at places like that.
the Harris campaign keeps sending us is information about the long lines at college campuses. And one source said to me, we can't count on those votes for Harris. Kira.
All right,
Eva Pilgrim. This is a big one. It's North Carolina, 16 electoral votes go to former President Donald Trump. He has won the state of North Carolina tonight.
Once again, for
Let's
Harris,
get right over to
it's now a vanishingly small map.
Starting,
the biggest opportunity still.
Literally starting the swing states victories. This is just glorious to watch, looking back on it.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, it doesn't matter that she's lost North Carolina or even that she loses these others. The other possibility that could be intriguing given what we're seeing out west is that she pieces something else together. Pennsylvania is an absolute must-win at this point. No question about it. She needs to win that state, but she could win
so
many communities in this country.
So let's drill down on Pennsylvania at this hour, because this number, the Donald Trump lead has grown.
Yeah.
And is this a surmountable lead for the Harris campaign?
There's definitely still votes on the table where it can be made up, but it gets harder as the night goes on as more vote comes in.
Governor Christie, what do you make of Pennsylvania, what you're looking at right now?
Well, I spent a lot of time there during my time as governor, and those 900,000 votes in the collar counties in Philly are a big deal. But it just keeps getting tougher and tougher there. You know, you got over a 200,000 vote lead now, so it gets tougher. But that part of it's not over. I look at Michigan and still see Harris in a pretty good position in Michigan. And as Ryan has said before about Wisconsin, I still think that's a jump ball. Although, look, you have to say at this point, you'd rather be Trump than Harris, given the way the map is being laid out as we sit here
John
now.
Carl,
And
this is
the other thing.
Potentially a big night for Donald Trump and all of the Republican Senate candidates who were looking either to fill an open seat or to replace a Democratic incumbent.
Look, it's not over. A lot of votes still to count, but the trend lines are clear. And what you are seeing is potentially Donald Trump on the precipice of the greatest comeback in American political history. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. We've seen presidents lose and come back. You know, we remember Grover Cleveland coming back, but this is...
You do.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. But
we were around for that. No, I'm just kidding.
But a president who left the White House the way he left, impeached for the second time, 7 members of his own party voting to convict him in the Senate, facing multiple criminal trials, indictments in 4 separate cases, convictions in the case in New York, and to face all of that, come back, recapture the Republican nomination, and be on the precipice of potentially getting back into the White House is something unlike anything we have ever seen in American history. Even with Donald Trump, we've just never seen something like this.
So
and
right
to see
now,
the
as you can see from our projections here, the scenarios that we are running, it looks quite good for Donald Trump at this
It's an
point
uphill
in the
climb
night.
at this point. It would seem mathematically for Kamala Harris to catch up to Donald Trump with this kind of lead in Pennsylvania, though the Harris campaign certainly isn't even acknowledging that. They've already said this is going to be a very long night or nights. North Carolina called for Trump, 69.7 out of 100 chances of winning, the simulations that our team is doing, 30% chance of winning for Kamala Harris. Show us what happens with Pennsylvania really for either one.
Well, Pennsylvania puts Trump over the top at this point. I mean, there's no way anymore to see how this doesn't devastate her chances.
270.
But I want
Kamala Harris with 194 electoral votes. Donald Trump with 230 electoral votes. Everyone now waiting to see how the blue wall will go, actually, which way the wave hits when it hits shore, I guess, because it's very close. Kamala Harris's campaign believes it still has a pathway.
New Mexico, New Jersey, and Virginia were very, very solid fights by the Republicans, in my opinion. It really showed a lot of shift to the right, and I don't think a lot of people talk about that just as much, but it was pretty cool to see live.
Through those 3 states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, though it is very tight and mathematically challenging at this point. Also want to go to Whit Johnson, something you've has some late reporting from the Trump campaign. Whit, I would gather the Trump campaign is very happy with what they're seeing, and we heard from Reince here a short time ago that Donald Trump himself extraordinarily pleased with how the night's gone.
That's right, David. The party is really energized here tonight. A lot of confidence in the room. And a Trump campaign spokesperson tells us that the former president is actually on his way right now to the convention center where we
in
are
West Palm
from
Beach tonight. Whit, as soon as he gets there, you'll let us know. Let's go over to Eva Pilgrim. She's in Washington, D.C., Howard University. Eva, I gather the temperature of the evening has shifted there.
Quite remarkably, very different than what Whit is seeing there at the Trump campaign. You can see this was a very crowded area just a short time ago, when we last came to you. The crowd is leaving. They have been leaving for some time now. And, you know, the campaign is telling us that they still think that there is a chance that they can hold that blue wall. But there are a lot of nerves and a lot of reservations that people are having. We heard Whit talking about the fact that the former president is on his way to his campaign event. At last check just a moment ago, the vice president is still at the Naval Conservatory, which is the vice president's residence here in D.C., is not on her way way here. And as you watch that crowd there shifting away, I mean, it has become dramatically smaller. People just waiting. We've heard repeatedly from the campaign that to tell staffers to go home, that they are not anticipating a result tonight, to get some sleep. But a major vibe shift here. I had one Democratic source tell me that the vibe is not good. And this is brutal for them,
Arizona.
David.
Before we bring her in, we're just going to pause here in just a moment, just so that the rest of the network can join us here. Let's pause here. That's the quietest this room has been all night. Let's get to Elizabeth Schulze. I want to bring in Arizona. She's diving into the exit polls for Arizona specifically. What are they saying?
And virtually every possible metric, David, Trump is outperforming himself from 2020. When you talk about women, when you talk about Latinos, those without a college degree, senior citizens, and independent.
Of Arizona, we have another state.
So imagine this, right? 8 years, if you consider the 2016 to 2020, 2020 to 2024, 8 years of crying and hysteria about how bad Trump is and the Republican Party, this and that. He's outperforming every single metric possible. Let that sink in. That's how much of a culture shift and a mandate Trump actually got during the 2024 election.
Call, and this is a big one. Georgia, and as we heard from the Secretary of State earlier, forecasted this moment, 16 electoral votes going to former President Donald Trump. He wins the key state of Georgia. He lost it to President Biden 4 years ago by about 11,000 votes. He was determined to win that state back. He has done exactly that tonight.
Right now, the 538 chances, just based on these states, and that doesn't take into account the margin in the other states, an 80% chance of a Trump victory. And if you're just looking at the pure math right now, if you flip Pennsylvania to Trump, that's 270 electoral votes right there.
Kept the
Put
door
this back
open,
here.
and now we see that we have a situation where Philly's going to have to overperform, but there are red places that are still coming in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Milwaukee will have to overperform. So yeah, there may be a narrow path, but I don't know if I have my rosary beads on me.
Yeah,
Colin.
Right.
This is shaping up to be a really big night, obviously, for Donald Trump.
I do have one update, which is that we had expected to hear from Kamala Harris tonight. We now know a source telling us that is not going to happen. We do expect shortly Cedric Richmond, her senior advisor, to come before that watch party and tell everyone essentially to go.
We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation. So thank you. We believe in you. May God bless you. May God keep you. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
Never an easy moment for whatever campaign has to make that announcement into how the campaign was feeling. And I know they thought this was going to be very close and still a challenge. Kamala Harris herself said repeatedly, we are the underdog here. But they did sense there was some wind, some momentum in these final days. Did they not?
Kamala Harris.
Before she answers that, everybody on the legacy media wanted to believe that she had the momentum. Harris's campaign wanted to believe they had the momentum in this election. They never actually had the momentum. Almost all of it was fabricated. So just yet again, gaslighting and pretending from the Democratic Party.
Herself said that the momentum was with her. And I think in part that was because of the huge crowds she was getting. I mean, I've been at almost all of these rallies in the last few days. She was pulling crowds of 20,000, 30,000 routinely in these final days. They felt that they were reaching all of those key demographics, that big, broad coalition that her campaign talked about so often, that they felt was going to really propel them across the finish line. We are not seeing that broad coalition at all showing up here tonight. In fact, quite the opposite. And there's going to be, I think, a lot of soul searching and a lot of questions in this campaign as to, what went wrong. That said, they are still, holding out hope. That's a very, somber Cedric Richmond there delivering that message. But as we heard from the campaign manager in this memo to the Harris team earlier tonight, stressing they expected this to be close. They do still see a path, but certainly not the path they were hoping for.
An extraordinarily narrow one mathematically at this point.
The fact that Kamala Harris is going home tonight, I think, is amateur hour. She has an obligation to speak. This pathway for her might be narrow, but it's also might be walking through the eye of a needle. She should say something to the people that adopted her as their nominee because they were just told by the president to do so. And she's leaving the country hanging now all night. And I think it's ridiculous and it's childish.
And while, first,
I couldn't agree more. And I think whether you should win or lose, regardless if it's the Republicans or the Democrats, people sitting there waiting for something to happen to see the presidential candidate at the rally, regardless if you're winning or lose, you should always show face and honestly just give them thanks for being there and let them know, like, hey, we're still hopeful, whatever the case may be. But this is exactly what she did the past 4 years. If it gets hard or not perfect scenario, whatever, she's gone, just like all the other Democrats.
I'm not sitting here excited about the returns or the results. There's still a path. There's still a path.
And we'll come back to all of you right after this. Our live coverage continues here in a moment. A slim path, but a path continues.
Democratic officials are sounding very glum at this hour. There's about a 200,000 vote lead that the former president has. It might at this point be insurmountable. The economy, obviously.
But in the end, here we are. This is democracy.
We have a major call to make at this hour, and it's the power of the Senate moving forward. It's precisely what we've just been talking about with this conversation. Republicans will take control of the Senate with that call in Nebraska. Deb Fischer holding on to her seat tonight. If Donald Trump is named the next president, he will have a Republican Senate. Drilling down on the Pennsylvania numbers to see if the math is even possible or how narrow the path is for Kamala Harris. Does it exist still?
Oh, look, anything's possible. It's just really hard to see how you have to squint to see the path at this point. I think
we've also heard on Elon Musk's X platform from Mark Cuban, who, of course, was a very prominent surrogate and supporter of Kamala Harris. I interviewed him just over a week ago. He's saying, congrats, Donald Trump, you won fair and square. Again, we haven't called it yet, but that's a very
certainly
prominent,
not the message coming from the Kamala Harris campaign. Just to be clear, Mark Cuban may be a very, a top supporter of Kamala Harris, but their campaign is still insisting they have a slim path here.
But even they recognize that in kind of going dark tonight or going quiet, that they're opening up all of this sort of airtime and conversation to the real possibility that Donald Trump is going to return as president, particularly given the mathematical path here that we see ahead of us with the blue wall. I mean, there's no way around it. He's had a very impressive night, not only in the Sun Belt, but right through the blue wall states. And so, in not giving any sort of more explanation from the Harris campaign, this is where the conversation is going to go.
And they know that. Look, they made a choice. Kamala Harris not coming out tonight to speak, likely because she didn't really know what to say. I mean, they still want to see the rest of these numbers come in. The last sort of official word from the Kamala Harris campaign is that they are waiting this out. They want to see, every last vote counted in these key states, but they are seeing exactly what we are seeing. This is certainly not the night they wanted and had hoped to have. Are they ready to come out and say that definitively? No.
All right. Former President Trump expected to speak at any moment. Not ready to call that state. There is still outstanding vote. And so let's get over to Rick Klein. That path is still extremely narrow for Kamala Harris. And if she were able to pull it off in Pennsylvania, she'd also then need Michigan and Wisconsin as well, where she's trailing in both states at this hour. Any new reporting from the Trump campaign?
Thanks. Waiting on him to come out to deliver what will be a victory speech. I mean, he's gonna declare victory. This, according again to one of his top advisors.
So obviously, we just have to make it clear that we haven't called it yet.
We haven't
will
called
definitely
it.
Listen in and that is the direction that this race is absolutely taking. And no matter how you look at this is a major night for Donald Trump across the map through all of the battlegrounds, even the ones that haven't been called yet. The turnout has been extraordinary.
Yeah, David, the crowd
Trump.
is cheering very loudly. That's because some other networks have projected the race for Donald Trump. Of course, we are still waiting on a few states to come through, but this is the cheering that we're hearing in the crowd, just adding to the anticipation of the former
any
president.
Numbers from Pennsylvania, Rick?
Not really, David. We're waiting on Philly and waiting to see if we get a little bit more. It is just such a daunting math, and I've been clicking around on this board to try to find any way to piece together the votes. And look,
is that
there's always a
Harris's
hypothetical
number among women was a few points, 3 or so points, off of Joe Biden's.
So she did worse among women than Joe Biden?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an astounding.
Those are the final exit poll numbers, or are we going to have final numbers?
Oh, they'll be tweaking it well into the morning.
Yeah, well into the morning.
She did
if
2 points worse than Joe Biden did in 2020 with the female voters.
Yeah, if that holds, that is really,
Stand
really.
by.
We do have a,
Carry on.
Here's the call of the night. We can project now that Pennsylvania, the biggest battleground prize of the night, will go to former President Donald Trump. ABC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the 19 electoral votes in the state of Pennsylvania. We had said for many weeks leading up to this election that this was a must-win state for both Kamala Harris and for Donald Trump. ABC News now projecting Donald Trump wins the state of Pennsylvania. That essentially gets him the presidency, although we have not called what he absolutely needs to get
chips
there.
are falling
Right?
into
place in so many words here.
That's exactly right. I mean, Alaska, very strong likelihood that he will win not only the Electoral College, but also the popular vote.
And that's really going to matter, John Carl, to the former president.
I mean, absolutely.
It's beyond even talking about pathways to 270. 270 is within his grasp. It would be beyond shocking for him not to receive 270 electoral votes. I can't really fathom a situation where all of those things would fall into place for Vice President Harris. He's knocking at the door, and it's kind of opened it already.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of the numbers coming in and making sure there's absolutely not a possibility any other way before our decision desk. And we really appreciate their great care. We would do this no matter what campaign it was. And this is what election nights are in America, and we're used to that. I do want to, and there you have it. Kamala Harris, 218, Donald Trump, 266, though, as Rick Klein mentions, we see where the math will come from that will put him over 270. We're just waiting for the official projection.
And then to win the way he won, to win the popular vote, to win decisively in the Electoral College, to have what appears to be, at least potentially, lining up to be a clean sweep of the battleground states. Look, Democrats spent more money than Donald Trump on this race. Democrats thought they had more enthusiasm than Donald Trump. They were proven to be wrong on that score. This was something I was talking to Democrats in the final days of this campaign who believed that they had a chance, that Kamala Harris had a chance to basically run the table on the battleground states. They thought that something had fundamentally changed in the race. This is what we were told. And Mary heard the same thing. And it just wasn't there. Donald Trump won and won decisively. We're waiting for our final call. But what we've called so far,
look, she can't even look at that guy. He was spitting too many facts. Yeah.
It's astounding.
Anything more from the Harris campaign tonight?
They are notably dark, and silence speaks volumes, I think, at this hour. We do know that she is going to come out and speak tomorrow. The remarks that she had planned to give tonight were postponed. She'll be there speaking, we believe, at Howard University tomorrow. I just keep thinking about the picture that they had been painting of Donald Trump in the last days and weeks, this really dire picture, calling him unfit, saying that he simply doesn't represent and stand for the ideals of this country. Kamala Harris called Donald Trump a fascist. And she continued to argue over and over again that she could bring the country forward, that she could turn the page. And it turns out that the country did want to turn the page. They just wanted to turn the page on Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration. And what a remarkable, different vision we are now getting from this from this election. Elections tell you a lot about what the country stands for and what the country wants. And it is just such a drastically different vision from the one that Kamala Harris was outlining.
And some surprising
Actually, I had a
numbers
conversation
given the
with
polling.
the president after 2020, and he was obviously upset about the outcome of the election. And I was talking to him, and I told him, look, I know it would have been better just to win, but if you could write the chapter in your book, there would be nothing more Trumpy than for you to lose, run again and win. You couldn't possibly think of a better ending to this story.
But you wouldn't have written the January 6th thing into the chapter, would you?
107-day sprint to a finish line that didn't end the way she was hoping. Where are we headed next? Mark Burstein in the control room? You want to talk us through? So give us the pathways here, Rick, of
Back to
the
election 2024 on ABC. Here again, David Muir.
Welcome back now, 6 minutes past 5 o'clock here in the East on this Wednesday morning after election night in America. We are very much looking at Donald Trump set to be the president-elect. We have not projected as a network officially. Obviously, the math is very much in his favor. It's looking increasingly mathematically impossible for Kamala Harris to catch up here, but we're being super careful with our decision desk, making sure that everything has been checked before we're willing to project.
Stand by, Rick. We're
As you pause here to project. And we can project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, the key battleground state of Wisconsin. It's 10 electoral votes. I believe that then makes Donald Trump now, ABC News can project that the former president, Donald Trump, 47th president of the United States. That takes him to 276 electoral votes. There are still states on the map to be counted, not since Grover Cleveland. Tonight, it's now become a reality. Again, the breaking news at 5:31 here in the East, former President Donald Trump, ABC News now projecting, will be the next president of the United States, and part of the path that he built along the electoral map is this blue wall that the Democrats were convinced would be Kamala Harris's best route to the presidency. Donald Trump winning Pennsylvania, and now he has won Wisconsin. He won North Carolina and Georgia. And a number of other battlegrounds are still being counted where he holds leads. Significant.
At this point, this is just an unbelievable comeback, the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States. And this is a victory unlike his 2016 victory, certainly unlike his loss in 2020. Donald Trump not only wins the Electoral College, but it looks like he has a very good chance of winning the popular vote. He comes back to the White House, rising like a phoenix from the ashes after having left in disgrace, twice impeached, facing multiple indictments, convictions here in New York, and he captures the White House in a way that he didn't even do the first time, and with the strength of a significant majority in the United States Senate as well.
See, that guy, although he hates Trump, he has some neutrality with what he's saying. And I think if more of these people took this route, they would be more successful and their networks would make even more money.
Decision to bow out after that horrible debate performance in June was a decision that should have been made earlier. That would have perhaps given the Democratic Party more time to do some sort of primary. He did, or would have given Kamala Harris more time. However it turned out, or whoever the Democratic Party chose or people voted for, perhaps that would have given them more than 107 days, which is all she had to introduce herself as a candidate at the top of the ticket.
There's certainly going to be a lot of discussions and deep soul searching, I think, within the Democratic Party about how this all unfolded, and a lot of deep questions for the president about the way he went out of this race, the timing of this. Could the outcome have been different if Democrats had had time for a primary, for instance? But Kamala Harris, in those 107 days, really cast herself as the change candidate. That is hard to do when you are the sitting vice president. And when you look back at how things could have been different, I think we have been discussing this all night long and into the wee hours here. The fact that she wasn't able to really differentiate herself enough from the president to say to Americans who are suffering economically, that what she would do differently. And to really put a fine point on that, I think is going to go down as one of the biggest errors in this campaign.
And will define the Biden presidency to a large part. And President Biden, for the longest time, thought he was best positioned to keep Donald Trump returning to the White House. That's a calculation they'll all have to look back on. Lindsay.
So that was an awesome video to watch. Obviously, shout out to Base Life Guru yet again. I'm looking forward to watching all of these other network coverage of the 2024 election. It's going to be so funny to look back on the horrible takes, the copium, the hopium, and overall the triumph that Trump and the Republicans had within this election. I'm so happy that he won, and overall couldn't have went any better in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share Smooth Unfiltered. So yeah.